So I'm just here to help you guys gain an understanding of real estate investing. I'll go over mostly just two types of real estate investing, but there are others. Reasons to invest in real estate, the risks and rewards of real estate, and something called the Mayo method. All right, so real estate investing is when you purchase, own, manage, rental, and also including the sale of real estate properties with a primary goal of generating profit or income. Some of the reasons people invest in real estate, and one reason why I decided to start investing in real estate, is to build wealth for myself, for my children. I know Mark has rental properties for his children that he's helped, and I'd hope to do the same thing at some point. And also, when you have rental properties, it generates passive income. Or if you are like a silent investor, I would say that's pretty passive, where you invest, but you're not necessarily doing any of the work. You're not finding contractors. Maybe you guys are real estate agents, but there are some people that are not. So you may be helping people to generate passive income or build their wealth. Portfolio diversification, if you're into like stocks and any other kind of investing, this is another way to diversify your investments. And there are tax benefits to investing. In another session, I've gone over how to treat your real estate business as a LLC and all of those tax benefits. And you can also keep it as a sole proprietor, where when you file your taxes, you just use your social security number. I personally have set up an LLC, and I know a lot of the other leaders on AMP have also done that as well.
Maleeka, can I just add one statistic for those that are on the call?
Yes.
Guys, one of the reasons why Maleeka and Gina and Dana and I and the other leaders are so vested in assisting you to grow a real estate business, this is one of the critical pieces of it, investing. 34.7% of this nation's gross national product is related to homeownership. 34.7 of this nation's gross national product is related to homeownership or real estate. You have gotten your license and you're involved in an extraordinary journey. Please remember that when you are marketing real estate services. What you do is extraordinarily important to the folks that you're assisting, and it's also a huge part of what this country is all about. So there you go.
And if you guys have questions, just ask, stop me while we're doing this. Don't feel like you need to just wait until the end. You may forget them. And if you need an example while I'm talking through any of the slides, feel free to ask. Investing strategies or flipping, where you're basically buying a property, doing the repairs or renovations, and then the plan is to sell it for a profit. I think that's a great way to get into investing, unless you have almost unlimited cash and you're not looking to make a huge profit in the beginning. Buy and holds, I think that these are future steps if you're just getting into investing. Buy and holds are considered rental properties, so you're purchasing a property still with the plan to hold it for a long time and get the benefits of appreciation as the years go on. And then you will have rental income, and that rental income should cover the mortgage for the property. Unless you pay cash, then it should just be paying you residual income. And then there are other ones, which if you have questions, we can go into it, but I think it's a little bit more involved, and that's wholesaling, novations, commercial real estate investing, which is definitely not my specialty, land development, and crowdfunding, which is popular in certain cultures.
And guys, if you are looking to hold any homes and rent them, Red One has Red One Property Management. It's run by Samantha Blackburn, and she manages all of my children's portfolio, and they do a great job. So you have a good backstop if it's not something that you don't want to be a landlord. You want somebody to manage your property. We have that covered, and she does a great job.
I should also add for the buy and hold, that also includes Airbnbs. Or there's things called furnish finders for long-term travel nurses is another option, but that's a whole another method. Flipping, again, you're going to buy a property. You want to make sure that it's below the value of the homes around it and that you have an opportunity to do renovations, make repairs, make upgrades that would appeal to buyers. I know a lot of people that are just getting into flipping, they like to focus on homes for first-time home buyers or young families because those houses tend to go quicker and there's a larger buying pool. Then when you start getting into like $700,000, $800,000 houses, your buying pool definitely shrinks. And then you want to resell it. So typically when we're looking at properties for investors to flip, I pull CMAs, comparative market analysis against the property that I'm looking at. I run very tight radius. Mark and I do them very different. So if you are ever on a call with Mark and I running a CMA, we go back and forth, a lot of banter, because I like to run them very tight. I think about what will an appraiser look at when this home is done and the buyers are coming in and they have to prove to their bank or their lender that this house is worth what I thought it was 6 months ago or longer. I usually only go back 6 months, very different than if you're looking for houses or trying to find a good list price for your sellers. You usually go back a full year. So I do mine a little bit different. I also, if we're going to add a bathroom, when I'm running my CMA, I make sure I add that into the numbers. If we want to go from like a 1-bathroom house to a 1.5 or 2-bathroom house, I'll still run it with a 1-bathroom and then do my range up to a 2-bathroom just to make sure that I will get the value add. So if 1-bathroom homes are selling at 100,000 and 2-bathroom homes are selling at 120,000, doesn't cost me $20,000 typically to install a bathroom in a home. So to me, that knowing that information or that number definitely will make a difference. Or if you're adding a garage or adding a bedroom, all these things are things you want to think about when you're looking at properties. If there's space, if there's room to add additional value that you may not see immediately in the home.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you're evaluating, what else are you looking at when you're evaluating a potential house, right? I mean, I could imagine it's going to be, you talked about square footage, bathrooms, garage space. I mean, I'm assuming you would look at school districts, stuff of that nature too, or is that something that you don't consider? Or what other characteristics are you considering when you're looking at something to potentially flip?
I would say it depends on where you're looking for a property. Let's just pick the Linden area. The prices of homes in North Linden is going to be different than East Linden. The property that we purchased in July, at the end of July, that we're flipping now, it is in Arlington Park. So I tried to make sure I stayed in the neighborhood of Arlington Park. I'm not a person that looks at school districts or neighborhoods. I let data tell me if it's a good buy or not. Are homes selling in that area? Yes or no? Are they selling in under 30 days? That's kind of, the days on market, that's what I look for. Because I would imagine if only one house sold and it sold in 2 days, that's not enough data for me to say that someone should invest, their savings, their retirement funds, or wherever they're getting the money to invest I would not feel comfortable telling someone to buy there. If there's 7 houses that have sold in the last 6 months and they're all, you know, within 14 days, to me, that's a great place to buy. Even if school districts are not great, people are still buying in that area. So
If I could dovetail on that, the answer is that I think this is Kenny asking the question. Kenny, it comes back to the math. Maleeka is extraordinarily good at disclosing and exposing you to the mathematical calculation that goes into flipping. So it doesn't matter what school system it's in. She does have an issue with bedrooms, but I'll say no matter how many bedrooms, how many baths, she wants 3 bedrooms preferably. No matter how many bedrooms, how many baths, whether or not it has a garage or what school system it's in, for an investor in real estate, it comes back to the math. So if the math works in a neighborhood like North Linden, where I grew up, then let's snag one in North Linden. If the math works in Upper Arlington schools, great. Hilliard, Railsburg, doesn't matter what school system it is. We want to focus on the mathematical calculations as it relates to flipping and investing in real estate.
And I would say the better the school district, the more of an investment it would be. So I wouldn't, I mean, unless you have a large pot of money to set aside to invest, it would
Everything's
be
relative.
harder to get into the other areas. Are there houses that need renovation and repairs and can be flipped in Hilliard or Grove City? Absolutely. They're everywhere. It's just much harder to make a profit. Sometimes the margins are smaller, and I think that's a little more risky. If you maybe your return or your profit will only be 20,000 in those kind of neighborhoods, someone may want to, you know, offer less for the purchase price than what you thought the house would appraise for or what you wanted to list on the market, or they may have more negotiations, or, you know, you have to give more concessions when you're flipping. So all of those things I definitely take into consideration. So I try to find properties that have a greater margin or a shorter flip time to make sure that the market's also not changing too much by the time we're done. Did that help, Kenny?
Yeah, I mean that it's so you're saying it's pretty much based off the numbers. So in the days on the market, which I understand what you're saying. I just maybe from the calculation standpoint, I would want to see that. But okay, I gotcha.
I would say it's also investors' preference. Some investors don't care where we invest. Some investors only want nicer neighborhoods, and it's really up to the investor. I can only tell them what I see or what I know, and then the decision is theirs to make.
And I know Gina would agree with me. Well, one of the things we want to be careful of or avoid is steering. So, if somebody asks us as an investor, well, is there a difference in school systems, between investing in Columbus versus Benhana, as an example? The answer in our minds may be yes, or it may not be. Mathematically, it may not be, because Maleeka made it clear earlier that the margins tend to get a little skinnier when you get into these other school systems or other mailing addresses. But the answer is, if you're interested in investing in a particular school system because you're investing based upon the school system, please look that up online and check out their rating for yourself, because we can't address school systems, one being better than another, or crime rates. We're not able to address those kind of things for our investors. That's why we try to bring it back to the math, Kenny.
But I always ask if there's areas that they want to stay away from, if they're knowledgeable about the area, if they're if they say I don't want to invest in Hilltop. Great, we won't look in Hilltop. I'll look for properties outside of Hilltop. And that's just their preference. And I don't go into, well, it's not a bad neighborhood or it is a bad neighborhood. If that's their preference, then we just look for what works outside of areas that they ask not to be in.
I would agree. And like Mark was saying, you can look up the crime statistics. You can also So look up the school district's statistics on greatschools.org. They have every single school rated. So when I worked with an institutional investor, they had a hard and fast cutoff at, they did not want school systems below a certain number. And obviously, then I had to limit my search to that. So I just would reiterate what Maleeka said. I mean, if it's for yourself, then make your own decision. If it's for your investor, make sure they educate themselves and give you their criteria. That's all. I'm done.
It's,
Um,
it's called a buy box, Kenny.
Buy box. Yep, that's it.
very similar to, I would say, just traditional buyers, right? If they want in
Are you
certain,
using that plant?
what'd you say, Brandon?
My bad. My bad.
Oh, okay. The other type of investing or buy and holds, also known as rentals. You may have heard of the BRRRR method, which is buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. So you want to buy a property that is still undervalued compared to other rental properties or other houses on the street. You want to renovate it similar to the comps. I know that we all love certain colors or certain materials. Like I would love granite countertops. But not all rentals. Like if you look at the rental market or look at other homes in the area, they may not have granite countertops. So doing more than what is compared, what the house would be compared to in an appraisal would not be the best investment. Granite countertops, now, if there's room in the budget, I definitely recommend those for rentals. It's less likely that a tenant would damage those, but still possible. People do crazy things all the time. Next, you would want to rent out the property to a qualified tenant, start collecting rent, and then refinance once the property is rented. Typically, lenders will refinance at a percentage of the appraised value. So most of them are at 70%, some go up to 80, 85%. You just really have to figure out what works for you and what works for the lender. There's things called seasoning periods, which you have to own the house and have it rented out for a certain number of months before they'll let you refinance the property. Some people do not have a seasoning period. So as soon as you get a tenant, have a tenant sign the lease and they moved in, you can go refinance the same day. And then repeat. So after you refinance, you'll get a lump sum of cash. Now, if you used a lender in order to purchase the property or pay for the rehab at the refinance closing table, your that lender would get paid back, and then you'd get whatever the additional cash is in the deal. Let's say you bought a property and it was appraised at 100,000. You put 60,000 into it between, and these are very unlikely numbers. They're just round and easy numbers that I can use to give an example. Say you're 60,000 in with the purchase of the property and the renovations, and your lender will give you 85% to the appraised value of 100,000. You would get 85,000. You'd have to pay 60,000 to your lender, and then you'd get to keep the other 25,000. And use that 25,000 to repeat the process in whatever additional cash you may have to reinvest into a property. Key considerations or reasons to invest, I would say understanding your primary goal is something that you should think about. So your buy box, do you want to get into flipping for profitability? Do you want to get into buy and holds for rental payments? Do you want to focus? Some people also buy like duplexes, live on one side, rent out the other side. You can do a more traditional route for your lending. And then when you go to sell that property, you can save on capital gains tax if you live in the property for a certain amount of time. What is your understanding and knowing what your time frame is? So smaller homes or more cosmetic rehabs where you're just doing floors, paint, doors, kitchen, bathrooms, those have a shorter time frame than when you are doing things like ripping out all the drywall and starting over from scratch, or adding bedrooms, adding bathrooms. All of those add time into a renovation. Sometimes I know investors, which are light years ahead of me, but they tear down houses that are built, and then they have to have plans drawn, submitted to cities, and get those approved. That can take months, sometimes even longer. I know someone who's had, it took almost 12 months for the city of Columbus to approve a plan for their renovation. That's not standard, but it does happen. And then when you're doing things like land development, where you're building communities, now that can take decades to get finished, depending on how much land and how you proceed with developing it. Flipping, usually quicker, only a few months. That's the ones that I prefer, but there are some more aggressive renovations. You should also understand your level of involvement. So do you want it to be more passive, or do you want to be more active in the renovation, or active and not use a property management company, but manage your own properties, which a lot of people do. Mark did give a nice plug for Samantha and Red One Property Management.
It's also a legal issue.
As
When
far
you-
as what? As far as managing your own investments?
Yes, when you get beyond a certain point, there's a lot of litigation that might come along with that. So just be cautious.
Yes, listen to what Mark said.
Also, while we're here, we should probably mention that you, as a real estate agent, cannot manage rental property for somebody else. It
Right.
has to go through the brokerage. So you can't just, like, as an individual agent, say, hey, I'll manage your property for you. You cannot do that. It has to go through the brokerage, or you would have to get a broker's license and become a brokerage to do it yourself if that's what you wanted to do. But we just actually had that question come up this week, and we were able to help keep an agent out of trouble who was kind of looking towards doing that, and it's a no-no. So
Can I ask a question about that?
sure.
So in regard to that, let's say me as an individual agent, I have a relationship with somebody, and they're looking for a property management company, and they have apartments or some type of commercial or residential properties, and I refer them over to Red One. Would there be some type of referral fee or commission split, or how would that work?
I can't answer that. Mark, can you answer that?
Sure. If you are representing a buying client and you are asking, it was a little tough to understand you, Brandon, but you're a little bit garbled. But if you're asking, if I refer that buying investor who has purchased an apartment community or something to the Red One Property Management Company, can you negotiate a fee for doing that? And the answer is yes. You would talk directly with Samantha Blackburn. She's a broker. She's with Red One. You're licensed. She's licensed. And you're welcome to negotiate a commission from her that would then go through Red One as it relates to a transaction. Yes, you are allowed to collect a commission for making that referral. That works the same as you and I, Brandon, when we looked the other night on residential rentals on the MLS. You can negotiate a commission by bringing in a tenant, just as you can negotiate a commission by bringing an investor or a client who owns property to Red One Property Management Company. Yes, you can do that.
Thank you.
All right, and then other things to consider is risk and reward, understanding like what you're comfortable with as far as the level of renovation, or again, maybe the area you consider to be a risk, and then what kind of reward or return you're looking for. Are you okay with 10% return, which is better than what you'd get in the market? Do you want a 20% return on your investment? It really is up to the individual investor. typically before I start looking for properties with investors, I want to understand their buy box, understand what they're comfortable with, if they're okay with a 6-month total time for investment, or if they're okay with a year. Just depends on the person and the amount of money that they have to work with. Longer rehabs, even for flips or for buy and holds, rentals, it can be more costly. Risk considerations, the market changes all the time. That's why I only go back 6 months, because I don't want to pull a full year. And then when we're done with a property and it gets appraised again, let's say that process takes 6 months. Now some of the comps that I pulled before will be falling off. And so I think that it keeps it more accurate and more current. Mark has data and years of experience and he lets us know that if you are selling houses during the holidays, it's a little bit harder. Still possible. People are always buying and selling houses, but you won't get as many sales during that time. So I usually at this point look for renovations or flips that will take a little bit longer and carry us to the springtime. Real estate you can't get rid of as quick as stocks and bonds, but so hopefully when you go and get a hard money loan or use a private lender, they usually want to see some cash set aside so that if something's going wrong with a project and you need to access additional funds, that it's there. But it would be very difficult to sell a flip in the middle of a renovation and get it done quickly. It is possible, but definitely you would end up losing money. There are normally higher initial investments for larger renovations or properties that cost more. So if you're looking at a property where you have to pay $200,000 or $300,000 for the property in the beginning, plus pay for renovations, it just is very costly with the hard money lender, because you're paying interest during that time, and you will also have to pay more in closing costs and down payments. Economic conditions, I know for the last 4 years, things have been, well, not just the last 4 years, but definitely the last 4 years.
Thank you for changing that.
Things have been very crazy since COVID. So houses, which we've missed, we're selling like crazy, selling over asking. And I do feel like that is coming back around, where a lot of houses are going same weekend over asking. But someone did just post in the Red One Facebook site that their listings are not getting as much traction. Could be due to school, kids going back to school. People are not out and about, still very nice outside. Football starting, so there's a lot of different things happening. Also, property taxes went up this year quite a bit, so that's something that I also make sure we look at when we're calculating the expenses for an investment property. Interest rates, those are always fluctuating, but they're finally coming down compared to this time last year. So that should help most people when they're investing and help attract more buyers to the buying pool. And then with rentals, when you're turning a property, that's always going to be a cost. So you should definitely, and turning a property means when someone moves out, you have to go in and do a deep cleaning and paint and make sure carpets doesn't need to be replaced, or nothing was damaged. And if it was, you definitely need to fix those before you get another tenant in there. Maintenance options, people and repairs. Hopefully you put it in a lease and outline like what they should be changing on their own, like furnace, filters, that they should be changing them every 3 months to help reduce your liability later if they're not taking care of something and you have to do additional maintenance. Typically on buy and hold properties, recommend when you're doing and getting the renovation money from the lender that you do all of the mechanicals. So update your electrical, update your furnace, air conditioner, and your plumbing, so that windows, roof. That also helps take away any potential maintenance coming out of your pocket for some time. So you can at least save up money before you have to do that. Vacancies, so of course, if someone's moving out and someone has to move in, there's going to be a gap in time. And sometimes it may just take a little bit of time for you to find another tenant to take that spot. So you'll be footing the bill for the mortgage during that time. And then sometimes with tenants, there are issues, neighbor complaints or evictions if they're not paying timely. Then you have to get attorneys involved and make sure you're giving the proper notices. But people obviously own rentals and do this all the time. So it's nothing that people can't handle or that you can't get help with to make sure that you are handling all the situations in the right way. Or if you use a property management company, they'll help deal with most of this for you. Rewards. So high returns, depending on how, in my opinion, depending on if the property is terrible, there's a lot of money to be made. I've gone to properties that were hoarder houses or properties where people didn't keep up with the maintenance on the home. People with lots of animals, those ones are usually the best ones. They're the worst ones to buy, but those are the best ones with the best returns. Negotiating down the buying price as much as possible will also help give you a higher return. Passive income, so between renters paying the mortgage on a rental property and the property also appreciating, you should eventually, like once you refinance the property, like years down the road, say 10 years down the road, you should be able to see a gap in gaining more income from the rental. And rental income, you should be increasing that every year too. So it's a dual benefit. And then there's tax benefits. So you get to claim the mortgage interest, the property taxes, depreciation, repairs, and it would help reduce your tax liability. This is both for flips and for buy and holds. And then another reward is leveraging borrowed money. So pulling a mortgage out on the property or a HELOC on a property that would allow you to use that money for something else while the tenants are still paying the mortgage on the property. Any questions?
Can I tell a story and then you can open it up for questions?
Yes.
Okay,
I still
so
have more, I think. I'm pretty sure, but
go ahead.
oh, I mean, I have more slides, but I did want to just stop and ask if anyone.
The leverage piece. So my daughter and son-in-law owned a home in Westerville, and they decided to build a home out here near us. And we invited them to stay with us for the last year and 3 months. And we invited them to stay with us as early in the process of building their new home as they could possibly see themselves doing it. Why? Because they refinanced the home that they owned in Westerville, rented it, took that cash, used it to buy their new home, and their tenant is taking care of the entire payment on their refi. They still own that house, and now they own a new home. So leverage is really important, guys, if you use it properly. I just wanted to make that point.
And then Shanice, you had a question about commission rate for rentals. So when you're in the MLS, very similar to finding like there's residential, there's land, there's also rental properties. Used to be able to see how much you could get, not anymore. Most often it is not the same as, it's not a percentage. So sometimes it's $300, sometimes it's $500. Some time ago, it used to be like a month's rent would be your commission. So that would be just another negotiating piece similar to when you're helping a buyer find a property. Were you going to add to that, Mark?
Your job is to show the property, negotiate, of course, have the appropriate buyer's agency agreement in place, negotiate your commissions, which I would push for 1 month's worth of rent, Maleeka's right. It was interesting to see, you'd have a house in Upper Arlington that was for rent for $4,200 a month. And if you brought them a tenant, you would get a $500 fee for doing so. And so I would push, now that it's not on the MLS, for 1 month's rent, no matter what the situation is. We've had a couple of AMP agents that we've assisted do that, and they've gotten paid. So push for 1 month's rent. It's negotiable.
And I mean, I think that landlords would prefer to get a tenant in than to risk not being able to have one and have to do the work.
Yes. And once you present the tenant, guys, to the landlord, and there's a meeting of the minds between them, you step out of it. The landlord or their property management company will take over from there. They will put your tenant client through their background check and their credit report, which your client pays for. You get paid upon the commencement of the lease. So once you've presented it and they've come to a meeting of the minds, you don't have to do a lease. In fact, you can't. You just step aside, stay in touch with the landlord and the agent representing the landlord, and ensure that you get paid upon the commencement of the lease. They do all the background check and all that good stuff, collect all the money, and that all gets handled by them.
Yes.
So I have a question. Hi, Maleeka and Mark. It's Cassie.
Cassie.
Hi. All right. So like you kind of know that I do a lot of this stuff for Jesse. But I just actually stumbled upon someone that wants a rental, but then they also are looking to potentially buy. So I connected them with a lender today. But the issue is I've never worked with like MS Renewal or Main Street Renewal, like the larger companies. And I'm a little leery on even recommending this. The client likes the property, but I'm just more so looking at the process for that because they have a go and show, which is what I'm used to. But do I still need to get the buyer's rep agreement signed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Protect yourself. The only time a buyer's exclusive agency agreement does not apply is in commercial. That's my understanding. Gina, correct me if I'm wrong. And even in those situations, you still have an exclusive representation agreement. It's just under the commercial tab in .loop. You do not need a buyer's exclusive agency representation for commercial property. Anything residential, get one signed.
So should I be doing the specific address or should I? Yes.
Yeah, it's between you and your buying client.
Okay.
Probably, yes. You would probably want to make it address specific to give them a level of comfort. And then, frankly, if you show them more than one, have them fill out more than one buyer brokerage agency agreement and make them all address specific. You can do one every time you have a showing. Hopefully, they'll like the first one you show them.
Well, hopefully they'll buy a house. That's what
Yeah, hopefully they'll buy a house. Sorry, I skipped that. Yeah.
So I know
What's very
haven't-
smart of you, Cassie, is to recognize that when people come to us as licensed real estate agents and say they want to rent,
Yeah.
our first obligation is to ask them why.
Yeah.
Why not buy? So
Exactly. Yep.
Yep.
I don't
Good
know your
stuff.
specific situation and I can like chat with you afterwards, but also look into like something like Landis, which still pays realtors for helping clients buy properties, even though they may not be ready for it yet, like financially or credit wise, but you would still get a commission. They'd basically rent it back. Landis would buy the property from the seller in cash, and there's a whole way to do that.
Yeah, I'll connect with you because I've been looking into that program for a while, but I have not gone through it. So definitely gonna hit you up.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I just want to go over just actual numbers. So there's something called the Mayo method. Mayo stands for market, analyze, yield, and optimize. And it's just a way to like quickly figure out if a property will be valuable or if you should invest in it or if you shouldn't. Speed is crucial. So the longer you hold on to the property, the higher your holding cost and lower your return on your investment. knowing your market. So for me, I make sure I am up to date on information from the MLS. I know the zip codes that have the most home sales over the last year, the average days on market, the zip codes and cities that have the, by selling price, all of those details, because I'm a numbers person, as Mark said. I make sure that I know what's going on. And so that's why I make decisions based on numbers, not on emotions or thoughts. Even high crime rate areas, if it's maybe and it sells and the list price are okay for the area, I would consider it. Maybe if I know there's some areas where there's a lot more theft, and then that impacts your speed. So maybe not picking those areas, but homes sell everywhere, or else people wouldn't live in them. And then I always make sure I do an accurate ARV estimation. Again, if you pull 12 months and some of those higher priced properties fall off, when you're done and another appraiser comes back in to look at those properties, you could have overestimated what you thought would be a $30,000 gain. If your comps are now $10,000 or $15,000 lower, that immediately impacts your return. And then I always make sure, depending on the renovation, that I have at least 5 to 10% buffer in expenses to cover delays or unplanned, like something gets stolen out of the house, or you open up a wall and now you notice that it's got leaks in the pipes and you have to replace that, but you weren't planning on replacing all of the plumbing in the property, or just a few examples. So understanding your market, each neighborhood, every zip code, sometimes even same zip code, but different sides of the street if you're crossing over major intersections, understanding like where those lines are. If you're not super familiar, maybe talk to someone else or one of the leaders on AMP and just ask for help. I typically do not cross over any major intersections, which I know that's how we're all taught to do it by Mark. But even crossing into another neighborhood or another community, if there's like multiple communities in one, I typically will just make sure I run it very small for just that particular community or development. Understanding your buyer profile. I think first-time home buyers are great. If you're looking for people with families, are you looking to sell to investors that just want properties that are already done and they can come in and just start collecting rent? There's a market for just about everyone. Or if you want to do homes for people that want really high-end renovations, you can also target that. It'll be a lot more money. And but whatever your investor wants or whatever you want to do, either one, just know who your profile is. And then market trends, just understanding the timing of the year, understanding how many houses are on the market, understanding where interest rates are. Those are all things that will help when you're deciding what the best solution and exit strategy is. As an example, so if you were looking in a suburban neighborhood with lots of young families, you'd probably want 3 or 4 bedrooms with an updated kitchen and bathrooms. You can also consider school districts or how close they are to parks. I personally like to do minimum 3 bedrooms. Do 1-bedroom houses sell? Yes, they do. Do 2-bedroom houses sell? Yes, they do. I just personally think 3 bedrooms and at least 1 bathroom, 1.5 or 2, even better. Homes are what I look for. So the numbers that I pull are all for at least 3 bedrooms, just because I think they're easier to sell. And so that's part of my buy box. I do not care about neighborhood because I just go with the math. But understanding what you want and what your investor clients want, that is also what is important. Property analysis, again, ARV estimation. So make sure you're running a good CMA. Scope of work. So I usually, based on how I find properties, I typically look for the scope of work based on photos. if initially and on my initial estimates, I think that the repairs will be a certain amount, and I'll always use the auditor's website to find the holding costs. So property taxes, I will know an estimate of what the insurance and utilities will cost for the duration of the project, and the loan interest. I've been pre-approved through multiple lenders, so I kind of use like just a range. And just from experience and time, I also have a calculator, and I've taken courses on renovations and rental properties, and I've used those calculators as well. I've built my own. It just depends. But if all of those numbers work, then I go to the property, I walk the property, and I just true up the repairs and renovations to see if what I estimated on pictures still holds true and if the deal still works. That is the same example. So calculating your yield, your return on your investment, your profit margin, you take all of those numbers, lots of numbers, into consideration. That's why I use a calculator. I just plug it into Excel in a few spots, and then it spits it out for me. So in this example, if let's say your minimum return amount is 20%, you find a house, the ARV is 350,000, you buy the property for
What does
200,000
ARV stand for, Maleeka?
after repair value.
Thank you.
You buy the property for 200,000, your buying cost estimating at 1.5%. Your renovation cost, estimating those at 50,000. Holding costs, so that's your taxes, your insurance, your interest during the time that you have the property, and
Utilities.
utilities, yes. And then selling costs, we usually estimate 9%. Again, if you're flipping a property as an agent, you know you would prefer 3%, so it's always best to offer 3%. If you don't want to pay yourself 3%, you can take the selling cost down to 9%, but you have to get that approved.
6, down to 6 is what you meant
Down to
say.
6%. Sorry, yes. But you would have to get that approved through the brokerage. So all of those numbers in yellow add up to $258,000, which is your total investment. Your profit would be 60,000. So you take 60,000 and divide it by your total investment, and it's a 23.5% return. So this would work if you wanted a minimum of 20%. How to maximize your profitability is adding value. So kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, those are always great ways to add value. Or if you find space in basements and you can finish a basement or finish part of a basement, if the attic is high enough and it can be finished as well, sometimes people finish attics. Cost control, get multiple bids from multiple contractors. Unless you have a trusted contractor, you can negotiate prices, whether you're going to, like, even at Home Depot, sometimes we go, if we're going to buy all these things, can you give us a better price on the material? Sometimes they work with us, sometimes they tell us no. Amazon's out there. Sometimes Amazon is cheaper than going into a store. There's liquidation centers, which you can get materials from. I would also recommend you keep your project on track as much as possible to minimize your holding cost and so you paid less on interest, you paid less in taxes when you go to sell, just less on all of those things, less in insurance. And then consider and also budget for staging and marketing. I think staging properties help people to see what a home would look like and envision their furniture instead of coming into a blank space, but homes will still sell. It just may still sell quicker or easier if you also invest in staging.
Before you go on to the next slide.
Hi, Sheila. Sorry,
Hi.
didn't see your hand.
That's okay. Okay, so when you were talking about adding on an extra bedroom or, converting the attic space, how do you handle that with like the auditor site to make sure that you get credit for it? Because that's one of the things that people will go and say, well, it's, it kind of creates that question of, okay, was this done to code because the auditor doesn't have it?
So I typically have plans drawn. So I work with an architect and then he will do the plans, they'll get stamped by a structural engineer, and then the city would review it for approval.
Awesome.
Now it is costly, so again, you have to make sure that it's worth the expense to add that bedroom or add that bathroom. Some people also just do it and do not ever get it through the auditor's website and still lists it as, 3 or 4 bedrooms, and auditor's website will just say 2 or 3, and they don't align.
Thank
But
you.
it happens all the time. Not saying that's right or wrong. Personal preference and investor preference just depends. It will add to your timeline for sure to do plans.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. So this was I'm wrapping up the session because I know we're at time, but next session on investing, we're still working out the October dates, but working on building a team, types of like investment products as far as like what lenders offer. I'll let you know a few lenders that I've worked with, how I estimate renovation cost, and then we'll walk through numbers on a property. Any other questions?
Could you also
I had
maybe?
a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Go
had a question.
ahead.
So in regards to creative financing or financing for individuals who have little to no money, what options would be for people like that, or people who are looking to just start out and investing?
Private lending, so not going through a traditional lender and posting on your social media or asking friends and family to invest for you or with you is the best way. There's no credit checks there. You don't have to submit any tax returns. I've asked friends and family to go in on projects because that's easier and it's less expensive usually than using a lender. At least if you know them. If you don't know them and it's a random private money lender, it may cost you more, but you're also getting your feet wet, and then also hopefully your profit would help you build so that you can go to a traditional lender later.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a combined sales pitch / compliment. Guys, you've listened now for the last hour to Maleeka go through this process. And while it sounds simple, it does, and it can be, it isn't. Maleeka has spent years developing this system that she has presented to you. She has invested many hours and thousands of dollars. Maleeka has a company that you can run all your investments through if you choose to. Take a less hands-on approach and a more hands-off approach, and then